All right, and we are live. Welcome back with Murphy Mac to another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast. How are y'all doing, everybody? Hope y'all having a great week so far. We have a very interesting podcast topic for y'all today. We have Miss Kirsten Karchmer. I don't know if I said that correctly, but we're going to bring her onto the screen. Here she is. Welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you today. Thank you for joining. We're glad to learn a little bit about what you do. Just a little bit about the podcast. My goal is just to help people get started on the fitness journey, or if they've already started, kind of keep going, try to learn a little bit more. We typically keep things pretty basic on a basic level, but we love having guests on so we can talk, deeper about certain topics. So we're glad to have you. Um, we're glad to have you join the podcast. So if you would just go ahead and introduce yourself and just give the listeners kind of a glimpse of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So thanks for having me, by the way. I'm really excited for our conversation. My name is Kirsten Karchmer, and I was one of the first reproductive acupuncturists in North America. Over the 20-year clinical career, I worked with over 10,000 infertile couples and essentially, really learned how to regulate periods and work with things like endometriosis and PCOS because those are basically underlying issues that impact fertility. And then I read a study in 2015 that said that less than 3% of couples could afford fertility treatments. And I thought, I'm part of that problem too. Acupuncture is really expensive and a lot of people can't afford it. And I thought, wonder if we can build a digital twin of ourselves, of my team, and if we could build something that would help people not only with getting pregnant, but with with women's overall health at a fraction of the cost. And that's the work company that we're working on called Conceivable. So we're building the first AI operating system for women's health.
Awesome. Yeah, that's AI is huge right now. I see all kinds of stuff coming into the fitness and health space with AI. So that's pretty interesting. I do have I want to ask you some questions about that too. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and just learn a little bit more about you. So like how did you get on this path? Like why acupuncture and how did you get into that?
Well, I was a competitive athlete, and this is a fitness podcast. So I was a competitive athlete when I was growing up as a gymnast, and I trained really, really hard every day. And then in my around 18, I got diagnosed with MS, and I couldn't walk anymore, and I couldn't hold a tennis racket. I was a tennis player too, and one of my friends kind of forced me to go to acupuncture. And I was like, that's like going to a psychic. I'm not going to acupuncture. And she's like, no, listen, nothing else is working. Like, you have nothing else to lose. Why are you being so stubborn? And I was like, okay, okay. And I end up going to the acupuncture. And what the acupuncturist told me was, if you only listen to this, whether you're trying to get pregnant or not, male, female, I just want you to listen to this one part. He said, because this applies to almost every health problem that we might have. He's like, look, when you were born, your body was really strong, and meaning robust, not outside, not like I was a little newborn weightlifter, right? But on the inside, my constitution, my energy, my organ systems, my hormones. But then as I was developing, maturing and growing, I was training 8 hours a day in an air conditioning gym in Texas. And so on the outside, I looked very Instagrammable at 18 years old, right? I was jacked, like Olympic
Mhm.
body, but I was sleeping like 6 times a day. I had like loose stools every day. I was exhausted. I didn't feel good. I didn't even have a period anymore. And the reality is that on the outside, it looked really healthy, but on the inside, my system was really exhausted. And so he's basically like, your disease was very weak and your body was strong. He goes, but now it's flipped. Your body has gotten so weak, it's given the opportunity for your disease to show itself. And that was really kind of what had happened. And then he's like, my job is to restore the constitution, all of the underlying things that are making you weaker than your disease. And then maybe you'll go into remission or at least have reduction in symptoms. Well, that was 32 years ago. And I was in remission. It took about a year and a half, but ended up being in remission for almost 30 years. It was only when I went through menopause, I started having like new symptoms that I had never had before, that now I'm just kind of figuring out how to like readjust and with new hormones and things like that. And so, that day I decided to go to acupuncture school. I was already a linguistics professor and changed career, went back to college, went to acupuncture college, and then ended up being the first reproductive acupuncturist in North America. I got really obsessed with the menstrual cycle because the menstrual cycle, every single thing about a woman's period, how regular it is, what day does ovulation come, the type and amount of PMS, what the bleeding looks like, the quality, the thickness, the volume, the pain, all of those things are like little micro science experiments that tell us how much her body likes how she's taking care of it, And especially around exercise, we can look at menstrual blood as a really good feedback loop, because when people are over exercising, they'll have less menstrual blood, less than 4 days of bleeding. And there are other indicators that we can look at to see, like, how can you calibrate what's the right amount of exercise and intensity for you to do for your body, what your body needs right now.
Awesome. And would you say what helped your MS was the acupuncture? Is that what you're?
Yeah, so,
Mm,
people always think that, like, the sticking of the needles is the only thing, but the reality is that, like, I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine, even though I'm called an acupuncturist. And so Chinese medicine, there are many good things that helped me, right? It's the diagnostic process, understanding through the diagnostic paradigm, like, what are the real underlying issues? It's how to pattern match them, right? It's using, like, qi, blood, yin, yang, things like that, but we can use those as Western uh, associations as well. It's about understanding, um, what every single piece of the menstrual cycle can tell us, so that then we can figure out what to do next.
the reason I asked you that is I just recently had a cousin that just got diagnosed with MS recently.
Oh,
So I don't.
interesting.
I think she's still kind of going through like all the testing and stuff of the. So I don't know if she knows exactly the extent of it and all that just yet, but I'll have to tell her about this episode and let her listen so she can
Feel
get some health with it.
feel free to let her connect with me. You have my email, so you have
Yeah.
to connect with me, because it's most important as soon as you get diagnosed. Because once you've started taking the medication, which are immune suppressants, it's just harder to get to that state. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because it's basically like taking birth control. When you take birth control, you're not having a real period, so the signals that would tell us about your progress are hidden. And so once you start taking the immune suppressants for MS, we don't see what kind of symptoms you're having. We don't see the intensity. We don't see if things are improving based on what we're doing. So it just makes it harder. I'm not saying don't take medication, but for me to help in the way that I help, it's easiest if I can do it before they start taking a lot of medications.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to let her know that for sure. And shout out to you for being a gymnast because I know how hard gymnasts work in practice. So I was a cheerleader in college, and then so we had a cheer. I never seen a gymnastics event ever, so we had a cheer at the gymnastics event. So I was thinking, we're gonna go in here. There's gonna be parents in here. It was in like the arena, the basketball
Yeah.
arena. And I was like, oh well, we'll just go in, we'll do our time, and we'll leave. Well, little did I know, we got in there, it was packed. There was not a seat left in the stadium. It was packed, and it was one of the coolest events we'd ever like. I loved going after that day. I loved going to gymnastics meets. They were so much fun, and just seeing all the. We didn't have a men's team. We just had a female team. So
Uh-huh.
seeing the strength that them girls have is it's insane. Like
It is.
it'll blow your mind seeing it up close like that.
But I would say the same about cheer. My daughter was a competitive cheerleader, and she was a gymnast first, and then in high school switched to cheer. And the things that they did, and I think at least with gymnastics, you do it by yourself, so you have to do hard things in cheer, and you have to do it synchronized with how many people
Hmm.
were on your team.
We had 10 guys and 10 girls.
Yeah, that's a huge team, right? So
Hmm.
everything, I mean, I would always tell my friends, I was like, you don't understand, they have to practice so hard, because the difference between first and second is like a tenth, a fifth, a third of a point. I mean, it's so, and that could be one person's not pointing their toes, like, could be the difference
Hmm.
between first and second. So I give you the same shout out, because I think it's even harder than being a gymnast, because you have to do all the same hard things, but with 30 or 20 or 30 other people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the same hard, but yeah, I get what you're saying. It's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, so let's dive into. So how did acupuncture? How did it go from you started because of MS, and then so how did that lead into fertility? How are those connected? How did you get there?
So I just when I was in acupuncture school, as we were learning, like, I have gynecology classes and things like that, but it was very different than gynecology. Although we're about half of our training is Western medicine, half is Chinese medicine. But as I started seeing all the relevance, everything that you could learn from a person's period, I was like, why doesn't everybody know this? This is amazing. Like, if we can harness this information, it's free. We don't need a lab test. We don't need an ultrasound. We don't need a scan. I mean, even for men, we can get the same kind of information from a semen analysis, but you have to, like, go to a doctor's office and, produce a sample, if you know what I mean. But a menstrual cycle just comes every single month, and everything that happens or doesn't happen really informs. And so for me, I was like, oh, well, I'm definitely going to focus on women's health because the menstrual cycle makes it so much easier. And because it's like, you see the problems with whatever's going on in the cycle, and then you make a hypothesis about what's wrong and how to fix it. And then 30 days later, it's like long division, you see the menstrual cycle and you see what percent things got better. I typically expect to see 25 to 30% improvement in whatever we're working on per month if we're on target. And sometimes we don't, but then we have to reinvestigate and figure out, like, well, why didn't that happen, or why did this happen?
It's actually an interesting time that we're having this podcast because me and my wife have been talking about, having kids here soon. So we
Uh,
haven't started yet, but I'm glad to kind of, get ahead of the game and learn some stuff to kind of help us out before we get to that stage.
Go
Hopefully we won't
download.
have. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go what you're saying.
I was just gonna say, tell her to go download the Conceivable app. It's free for the first month, so she can just get started with it. Like, it'll tell her the likelihood that you get a conceivable score, which is basically a prediction of like what's the likelihood you're going to get pregnant naturally in the next 6 months. And that score, we want to get that above 60 as soon as possible. If her score is above 60, she doesn't need to do anything. And if it's below that, it'll tell her exactly what to start working on, so that way, instead of waiting until you decide to get pregnant, ideally you start taking prenatals 90 days before you start trying. And you would do all of this at least 3 months before. Of course, some people just decide, and then or they've been trying even for years, and then they start using it. But the best case scenario is where there's no pressure. You haven't even decided you want to start getting pregnant, and you start getting acquainted with, like, what do I need to do? What do I need to work on? How can I improve this or that? How can I, like, start getting rid of some of the things in my house that might be disrupting my hormones and things like that. And then there's not a big pressure. It's like that now when she gets her period each month, she's not going to cry because, it's like once people are in it and they're trying, once they get their period and it means you're not pregnant, it's really demoralizing. So I strongly encourage her, get the supplements, get her a ring. The ring is so good. And use the app.
What kind of ring are you referring to?
We have a ring called the Halo ring, and it's a wearable like the Aura ring, half the price. They don't need to
Mhm.
cost $500. That's a big fat ripoff. Accurately tracks your temperature for you, but more importantly, it's the first ring. It's the first non-invasive glucose monitor. So you can't use this if you're a diabetic. It only tells you like your blood sugar is high, normal, or low. But what happens if you're using the app and the ring, they're connected. And so if, say, your blood sugar is high for, 4 or more days, once in a while it'll be high because you've just eaten too many ice cream cones or whatever. But if it's consistently high, then the AI basically sends a note to your chef and says, "Hey, her blood sugar's been high for the last 4 days. Up her protein and fat. Let's see what happens." And then she also sends a message to the therapist and says, "Her blood sugar's unusually high. I don't know why this is going on. Could you check in with her and make sure that something really stressful is not going on? Because that can also make you more like you're more insulin, less insulin sensitive." And so then that it's able to basically work with that information dynamically.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Oura ring because she actually already has a Oura ring, and she tracks her stuff. She loves that thing. She's already on top of it. So
Good.
will your app link to an Oura ring, or is it strictly the Halo ring?
It will eventually. It doesn't right now. The truth is that Aura Ring, I have in my experience, I don't want to say like a temperature is very important for our app. We
Mhm.
use temperature way beyond predicting ovulation. And so in order to use temperature in the app, we need it to be accurate. And I just couldn't get the Aura Ring to have an accurate, reliable, reproducible temperature for a basal body temperature. Like, it can take your temperature, but it can't. The basal temperature is the lowest temperature of the day. And I think that Aura is taking an average, because when I like take a temperature with my mouth and then I look on my Aura ring, it will be different because a mouth temperature is going to be different than a surface temperature, but it should be the same difference, like 2/10 of a point difference, higher or lower. I couldn't reproduce that. So I was like, I can't recommend it. That's why I
Mhm.
built my own ring, because I was like, I need an accurate temperature. So either they're going to have to take it in their mouth, or I need a ring, or some device that can accurately and reliably check it, because the temperature drives the recommendations in the app. So if the temperature is wrong. So what we basically tell people is, like, if you're using an Aura ring, you can connect it, but don't still manually take your temperatures.
Okay.
And I would say I would just return her Aura ring and say I couldn't, and just do the same test. Maybe she has one that's getting like the same, difference every single time, in which will be fine. She can manually put the thing in until it's connected. And then if it doesn't, I would return it. People return things to me all the time. Like, we have like a full 30-day happiness guarantee. I don't care. It's like Nordstrom. Give us anything back. We'll take it back. We want you to be happy. But sometimes people will send me like a bottle of our prenatals with one pill in it. And they're like, I didn't like them. I want my money back. I'm like, okay, well, it's 29 days. I'm going to, but
Yeah.
it's just, it's just part of doing business. But if your ring doesn't measure temperature accurately, I think it's a fair reason to ask for a refund.
Yeah, I never even thought about testing it in your mouth before. We should probably do that. See how accurate it is.
Do it for like 4 days. Wait as soon as she wakes up in the morning, and then what's the aura say, and then see what the difference is, and then see how close or different it is across 5 days.
Yeah, I definitely had to have to let her know about the app though. She likes looking at stuff like that, so I have to
Oh,
let her
good.
know.
You should have
She
brought her.
like
That would have been fun.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it. She likes tracking like all that stuff. She don't like me talking about it, but she likes tracking it. She
Okay.
gets a little what's the word? She's real modest about stuff like
Mhm.
that. She don't like to talk about it.
That's why it's so good to have the app, because you can talk to all the people in the app and you don't have to feel embarrassed. You can say
Mhm.
you're not going to believe what just happened in the bathroom, or whatever thing that you think is really gross or embarrassing. The AI doesn't care. It's like, okay, gotcha. Wow, that's, whatever. And then it can help use that to try to figure out what's that telling us.
So let's bring it back to fitness here. So where does fitness or working on your health, where does that play a role in your fertility for women, for improving fertility for women?
It's actually a really fascinating topic. So, um, often women will tell me, I'm doing everything for my fertility. And then I'll say, okay, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm a vegan, I'm doing CrossFit, I'm, taking this supplement. I'm like, all of those things are the wrong things for you. So women doing CrossFit or exercise to in exhaustion 4 or more times per week are 70% less likely to get pregnant. So we think when we're struggling to get pregnant that we want to get like as fit as possible. But we interviewed 16,000 women last year, and we asked them, what's your energy like on a 1 to 10 with no caffeine or exercise for 2 days? And 50% of the women said 5 or below. Only 8% said 8 or above. And when you are tired, right? So that what that tells me is like women are tired, right? The most small percentage are not tired, really tired. And when you go to do it, hard exercise, when you're tired or your heart rate variability is low, your body doesn't have the energy to get through that workout. So it has to grab it from somewhere. And the only other source of energy are the adrenal glands, which is why when tired people exercise, they feel so good because they're like, oh man, finally, I feel so much better. It's because you got a lot of adrenaline. But
Mhm.
you are going, every time that happens, you are taking a step back and you are in flight or fright. And no healing can occur in flight or fright. So the key takeaways are, first, ask yourself on a 1 to 10 with no caffeine or exercise for 2 whole days. So many people tell me, like, I've never had a day like that in my life, but just do a little test, figure it out, see what your energy is. If your energy is above 8, you can do whatever you want, but just keep watching what's your energy the next day, what's your heart rate variability look like the next day. If it's lower than that, if it's lower than 6, all I recommend is 10-minute walks 3 times a day after meals to start. This is
Mhm.
not the time when your energy is that low, you don't have resources. And we have to figure out why you don't have any resources. And if your resources are being redirected for working out, that means there's not resources for making hormones and not making resources for making blood or to circulate those. So it's really, really important that we allow for restoration before we start breaking things down. You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
as your energy, if you're using the app, as your energy starts to come up and your heart rate variability starts to come up, you can start increasing the intensity and then watch your energy, watch your heart rate variability the next day. And then you can calibrate so that you're, and what you want to do is make sure that you're staying out of flight or fright. And then you can use that as your guidepost. And movement is really important. What I've been actually creating are some exercises that are sort of low cortisol exercises. I basically borrowed all these things from, if you've ever been in like a place where there's a lot of Chinese people, sometimes you'll see old Chinese people in the field at the park or whatever, and they're doing Tai Chi, they're like, and it looks like nothing and whatever. But
Mhm.
what's really interesting is a study was published a while ago, maybe 15 years ago, that they were looking at, they wanted to show that like 30 minutes of some kind of cardio would improve blood pressure and cholesterol. So they had 100 people doing that. And then they're like, we need a control group. Who does nothing? Oh, Tai Chi, that's nothing. And so that was the control group. So you had 105 people doing exercise, cardio, hard cardio for 30 minutes a day, 105 just doing 30 minutes of Tai Chi a day. And when then they checked at the end of 3 or 4 months, I can't remember, and they were like, "Oh my God, the Tai Chi group outperformed the exercisers." And so I always say, like, we think that we have to work out really, really hard, but really, you'll get a lot. Again, after being a very serious competitive athlete or just training my ass off my whole life, I do about 20 minutes of exercise a day. It's either walking or these exercises that look like kind of like Tai Chi exercises. And I'm the leanest I've been in my whole life. My bones gained some density from it. And I'm sleeping better than ever because finally I think that my cortisol has normalized.
Yeah, you definitely have to do what's right for your body, and I think most people think that what's right for your body is actually a lot more than what it actually is. So I've actually
Yes.
toned my workouts back a lot. I'm kind of a fitness junkie. I kind of overdo it. I know I do, but I've told my workout. I'm only working out 3 days a week right now, which is not a lot for me. But I've seen just as the same results working out 3 days a week as I was doing 6 days a week. So
Yeah.
it is interesting, especially as we get older. Your body just you can't handle as much load and volume that you were doing at one time.
Do you know what your heart rate, your average heart rate variability is?
I don't. I should. I wear an Apple Watch. I'm sure it tells me on here somewhere,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't
It's
looked at
it's
it.
in the kit. You can look at it. You want it to be kind of like in my opinion, there's different opinions about it, but in my opinion, optimal resilience is around 100. What I have found is when mine is up at 100, I don't care about anything. Like literally, because it's really a measure of resilience. It's a your heart rate variability is measuring how your nervous system is responding to the environment. So whether that's somebody telling you something bad, watching a scary show, like eating, all of these things that stimulate our nervous system, it should get stimulated. And then if heart rate variability is high, it gets re-regulated and comes back to normal really quick. But if it starts out low, it stays low for a really long time and you get stuck in flight or fright.
Do you know where to find that on that
On
iPhone?
the Apple, no,
Oh,
it
here it
should.
is. Mine says average 66 ms. I don't
Okay,
know.
that's pretty good. I
I don't
mean,
know what
that's
that means.
so you want it above 100, but 66 is decent. Like the average of women starting using our app is 28
What does MS stand for?
milliseconds.
Okay.
I
So
think I just made
so
it up.
explain to me what heart rate variability is. I know in a sense, but just for people listening,
Yeah.
how, what they can so they can understand it.
Okay. So heart rate variability is not heart rate. Your heart rate is how many beats per minute. The variability is how much variation between beats. Just messed up my hair. How much variation? So if we were watching it on a monitor, we're checking your pulse and we're watching on a monitor, and say like my resting heart rate is 60. So you would think that if it was like 60, 60, 59, 61, 59, 61, 60, 60, you think that'd be better. That's a low heart rate variability. There's not much variation. What you want is you want to be like an orange buoy on top of the ocean, meaning you're sitting on the ocean and the waves come and you just ride it, right? A big tsunami comes and pushes you to the bottom and you're just like you just pop back up. That's high resilience, high heart rate variability. And if we were to watch that person over 2 minutes or 1 minute. Resting heart rate is 60, but it'd be like 60, 58, 40, 60, 61, 59, 70, 72, 48, all over this. It means that your nervous system can easily go back and forth with whatever is happening. And that is a sign of high resilience, which means, say, you get in a fight with your wife and you get really stirred up about it, right? Heart rate variability naturally goes no. That's like the tsunami. But a high resilient person, they just like after the fight and after whatever, you pop back up. Low resilient, 3 days, they're still in flight or fright over that. Like I'm not
Mhm.
exaggerating. And so I don't know if on Apple, if I don't think it breaks it down. Like I use an app called Welltory because it breaks it down. What percentage are you in flight or fright or rest and relax at this moment? And that was really helpful for me because I felt like I was really good, but then I was like, oh my gosh, every time I check it, I'm in flight or fright. Every time. And I was like, no wonder I can't sleep. And no wonder why like sleep supplements don't help. It's because of cortisol, why I'm not sleeping, because I'm stuck in flight or fright all the time.
It gives you all kinds of different data on here, but I'll be honest, I don't know what it means. So
Okay.
66 was for today. But
Yeah.
if you go back to like my month, I've averaged 75 for the month.
Okay, good.
For
So,
6 months, I've averaged 77, and for the year, I averaged 75.
okay, here's what I would experiment with. In place of those other workouts, do breath work.
I've heard a lot about breath work, and that's one thing I haven't tried yet. I need to try it. I watch a lot of Gary Brecka. I don't know what your opinion is on him, but he always talks about breath work, so I want to try it.
There's a guy on YouTube called who has a channel called Breathe with Sandy, and it's free. And he has at least 50 breathwork sessions. He's incredible. I don't know him, but I really want to have him in my app. So if anybody knows him, please tell him to call me. But he does a great job. And it's a good place because some are like 5 or 10 minutes, and some are up to like an hour and a half. So you can just start with like a morning routine. I was doing them just on my own, like doing 4-7-8 breathing, things like that. The effect is, it's kind of like yoga. Like if you do yoga at your house, you're like, stretching, whatever. But if you do an hour yoga class, it's a completely different thing.
Hmm.
Same thing with breath work. It will blow your mind. And that is one of the fastest ways to raise your heart rate variability.
So what does breath work have to do with heart rate variability? Like, how is it affecting that?
So your vagus nerve, this is a good question. Your vagus nerve, which runs from your brain, it's a cranial nerve down kind of by your carotid artery. That is the on and off switch, flight or fright, rest and relax. When we're in a situation when we're stressed for a long period of time, even though it's a nerve, the nerve function, it gets like flaccid, sort of like a weak muscle. Even it's not a muscle, but that's the best connection to it, which means it's not strong enough to pull you out of flight or fright. And so what happens is that when you do breath work, it basically strengthens the vagus nerve. And so things like singing also strengthen the vagus nerve, humming, chanting all cause vibration to the vagus nerve and cause, it's like weightlifting for the vagus nerve.
Hmm.
And the more toned the vagus nerve is, the higher the heart rate variability, the longer you're going to live and the more resilient you are both to harder exercise and for just like, the crap that's happening in the world right now.
Okay, yeah, that makes so you're kind of working it out essentially, and that's how
Mhm.
you're improving it.
But you're doing it, which is like laying in your bed and going,
Hmm.
it's very easy. It's so relaxing. And it's like I've started doing it in the afternoon when I feel a little bit sleepy because you definitely get really energized from it. You see, oh my gosh, for the last 2 hours, I've been breathing from my chest up. The first real breath you take, you're like, oh man, I haven't been breathing. It's good. It's a good feedback loop and it's free. I love like what can we do without paying anything that we can just keep on our phone anywhere is, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So outside of working out and of course the breath work you just mentioned, what are some other things people can start doing today to really kind of move the needle when it comes to their fertility or health in general?
Well, I always say that what works best is just a strategic approach. I mean, there's of course high level things like eat a better diet, but we need to know what diet is the best diet for you, right? Certainly you can start with a Mediterranean diet, but that may or may not be what you exactly need. The app can just prescribe that for you if you use the app. Um, Making sure that you're getting like 9 hours of sleep a night. Most people that I know think that 6 is enough. And 6 is not enough for optimal fertility under any circumstance. People will say, I'm fine with it. I'm like, how much coffee do you have? And he's like, just 1 or 2 cups. I'm like, well, have no caffeine and let's see what your day looks like. No
Hmm.
caffeine, no exercise. Let's see what your day is like. For optimal performance, like in some studies that they did with like athletes, they found that we need 9 hours of sleep for restoration. What I say is like just start getting in bed 30 minutes earlier and turn the lights off, put an eye mask on, and put a podcast on. Or I like the podcast This American Life because it's public radio, so they have that public radio voice. So they're like, "Hi, Kirsten Karchmer here, talking about whatever." It's very soothing talking, and
Hmm.
it's interesting, but not so interesting. If you're tired, you'll fall asleep, right? And if you fall asleep at 9:30, and you're like, oh, because you can go back to that podcast because it has like 5 different sections. You can be like, oh, I only heard the first section, which means you fell asleep in the first few minutes. Try to get in bed 30 minutes earlier. So try 9 o'clock, try 8:30, try 8 o'clock. People think that sleeping makes you lazy. Sleeping, unless you're depressed, people won't sleep more than they can. They just can't. You know what I mean? Like if you need to sleep a lot, it's probably because you're really tired. And once you get sleeping, it unlocks a lot of other problems. Because even around fitness, because if you're not getting enough sleep, one, your heart rate variability is going to be low. That's going to mess up all that. But in addition to that, then if you're not then what's happening is then you're not going to be sleeping well. If we don't sleep, sleep is where two important hormones get regulated, ghrelin and leptin. These are the things that make you feel full and satisfied and control cravings. And so when you don't sleep enough, you don't get enough activity on the ghrelin and leptin, which means you're going to make more poor food choices the next day, be more likely to eat outside of what your ideal diet is like.
Yeah, sleep is such a big one. I think everybody could use more sleep, especially in today's world. Everything's such go 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 all the time, and it's.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everybody could use more sleep. That's definitely a good one.
I agree. Nap if you can. I mean, when I used to, at my clinic, if it was really loud, I would literally go nap in my car for 30 minutes on days that it was cool enough, just because it's quiet out there, and I would just lean the seat backs, put some music on, and I was really tired in those days. But
That's dedication right there. So what else does your app do? It's like how is your so what's the AI doing in your app? How is it helping women?
so it's essentially a virtual care team. What I imagined before I built this is, after 25 years in my clinic helping women, if Beyonce called me and said, I want you to come and live with me for a year and really optimize everything, what would I do with her every day? And I was like, well, I'd sit down, I'd make her a cup of tea, I'd interview her, I'd figure out every tiny little underlying issue that needs attention. Then I'd figure out how those things are connected to each other so that we don't get overwhelmed. I would explain that to her. This is why these things are important. This is why it's important having, you know, we need to fix, you only have one day of bleeding or whatever because there's no lining. And then I would say, okay, now I'm going to make your menus for this week and I'm going to teach you why this is important. I'm going to make it so easy, even though she probably has a real chef. I'm going to do therapy with her, both for emotional support and help her to cope with the grief and stress and anxiety of being on a fertility journey. I'll analyze her tongue, which the app and the AI can do all of this, right? I will use a data analyst to understand all of the pieces of data that are coming in from the ring, from what she's tracking. She can track even her food by taking a picture of it. So if she's not following her menu and, we all have a break and it's like, I'm eating Pizza Hut pizza tonight. So what we want to do is we want to be able to easily track food so she can just take a picture of the meal and it can calculate the macros and then adjust her menus for that. Um, and then what it's doing is it's checking with her every single day, telling her the things that she can be working on. And then it's tracking whether she's doing them, not doing them, and if it's working or not. And then consistently reprogramming. It comes up with a list of supplements that are going to be the best supplements for her underlying issues. And then what we have is you can just hit a button and then we'll start making those packs for you every month. So it's like 30 individual packs. Customized to you. So no more plastic, no bottles, no, we just get a box and there's 30 packs in there and it's got a little dispenser. And what's really nice about it is supplements can be a great accelerant. There's no supplements for fertility. That's what you really want to know. I mean, I have a supplement company, but the reality is there's not supplements for fertility, but there are supplements to address underlying issues that might be affecting your fertility, like egg quality, like blood, like bleeding, like PMS, like cycle regularity, like cervical discharge, and so on and so on. And so, what we do is we identify those underlying issues, figure out what you need to work on, and we use supplements to do that. But what's so nice is we used to have individual bottles, and it was just really expensive. And I just didn't like that because our whole goal is like, how do we make families affordable for all people? And so we finally this year just recently found a new manufacturer who's able to do this pre-pack for us. And we went from like what would have cost at that quality, like $500 or $600 a month, down to $80 a month for the personalized pack. So up to eight really high quality personalized supplements pre-packed for you for $80 a month. It's a no-brainer.
That's awesome, and it's using the data from your app that you're inputting to kind of come up with which ones you need. That's pretty neat. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, we also have like, there are just there's some subset of people who are like, I just want to take supplements. I'm not ready to make any behavior changes. So those people can just go on our website. It says everywhere, take the quiz, take the quiz, take the quiz, and then you just get it. And I think they give you a 20% off discount for your first purchase. So that makes it like 60. So then it's a real no-brainer. I always just say like, just try 1 month's worth. The most common feedback that we get are like, holy crap, I was getting my stuff off Amazon before. I was paying like $300 a month and I never felt anything. I just was like, these are the things you're supposed to take. And after just 1 month of taking these, I feel differently. And that's just the difference between really premium ingredients and garbagey cheap stuff on Amazon.
Yeah, you don't realize it, but a lot of the vitamins you take are low quality or insufficient of what you actually need. Like they don't have near as much in there that you actually need for your daily dose. So
Uh-huh.
unfortunately, the good stuff is a little more expensive, like you
A
mentioned. So,
lot more, a lot more
mhm,
expensive. And, it's really hard because it's, like a fish oil is a perfect example. Fish oil is fish
mhm,
oil. If you're paying like $50 a month for a fish oil, I can almost guarantee that fish oil, that fish came from really polluted waters, right?
mhm,
Because fish that come from clean waters, like in Chile, that's where ours comes from, is like 10 times more expensive. Also, they're not using one kind of fish, they're buying fish guts, right? So it's like kind of like the sausage of fish, like whatever's left over to make that fish oil. So it's not consistent. And they're not refrigerated. Like warehousing supplements in refrigerated warehouses is very expensive. And if it's just in your house, that's not a problem. You don't need to refrigerate your fish oil typically, as long as it's have air conditioning and things like that. It's not too hot. But like our warehouse is in Florida. 7 months of a year, a warehouse without air conditioning would be like 130 degrees in there. That fish oil, just like if you put a piece of fish in there, what's going to happen in 1 or 2 days? It's going to be revolting. You would never eat a piece of fish that had been in a hot warehouse for 2 years. Why would you take fish oil, like that? But that's the problem. People aren't aware of like, this is how brands, not premium brands cut corners and make it look like they're having a good product, but they're skimping on either like you said, the dose, right? So it's like better product, but the dose is really low. Like Ritual, they have really high quality products, except when they made their prenatal, in order to make the price point more affordable, they took out a bunch of important ingredients. So their whole thing is like quality, 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 but what's in it is insufficient to actually be a real prenatal. So you just have to be careful. And we just decided to just do the work for you, and then make it more affordable than anything else.
so y'all's supplements you recommend is kind of like a prenatal stack almost. Is that how you would describe it?
Not even necessarily. I mean, we recommend you take a prenatal. We have a prenatal separately because that
Mhm.
has a ton of stuff in it. These are things like what else might you need to accelerate your progress? And that could be, I mean, we have people using the app who have polycystic ovarian syndrome or just period problems or endometriosis or PMDD. And so for those people, we're addressing the underlying issues of those problems as well. So nothing is there really to optimize fertility. It's to optimize those things that have to work to be fertile, like your blood sugar, like your cycle regularity, so like your hormones for PMS and things like that.
Okay, so you have a separate prenatal for that.
Yeah.
So what exactly is a prenatal? What is it doing for women? Like why do they recommend this?
That is such a good question that no one has ever asked me. Thank you for asking that because I think a lot of people don't know. So, first of all, you'll see brands that'll have like prenatal, first trimester, second. You don't need that. That's just marketing. Don't worry about that. It's not.
Mhm.
You don't need that. But basically, researchers. My dog is just doing something funny. Sorry. Researchers basically looked at like what are the vitamins, nutrition, and minerals that need to be built up in a woman's like in her body in order to have the best chance of having a healthy pregnancy and healthy baby. So you have a whole list of what should be in it, and then it was really long, and then they identified what are the things that our women are most likely to be deficient in. And then that's really how you formulate a good prenatal. There are many studies that have sort of formulated like what should be in a prenatal at what dose. And we basically, when we made our prenatal, we just followed those guidelines exactly. The only thing that we didn't add was inositol. And I didn't add that because the dose they recommended was 100 milligrams, but the therapeutic dose is 3,000 milligrams. And I was like, I don't know. First of all, everybody doesn't need inositol, and 100 is like if you made a chocolate cake and you're supposed to put a cup of cocoa in there, but you just put a tablespoon in, and you're like, I don't know, it's not that good of a chocolate cake. It's like because there wasn't enough in there to do it.
Mhm.
And so it's basically designed. That's why you want to take it 90 days beforehand because you want to basically upgrade your sort of nutritional status and then maintain it while you're preparing to get pregnant and then once you do get pregnant, because once you get pregnant the baby just starts taking everything. The baby does not give a rat's butt about you. Whatever the baby needs, the baby's going to get, but mama will suffer. So if we can get her really nutritionally sound, both with food, improving gut, making sure she's rested and ready to go, and then we use prenatal to make sure that that nutritional status is optimized, she's going to be in really good shape.
So you recommend start taking that prenatal 90 days before you start trying.
Yep.
And then once you get pregnant, do you continue to take the prenatal?
And then you take it till you're done nursing.
Okay, so even after the baby. Okay.
Because it'll help you to recover. I mean, especially if it's a high quality one, like don't buy a one. You can't do like it's not possible to get a one a day to get every ingredient at the right dose into a one a day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you go back to the cake mixture, you make that cake with your 1 tablespoon of chocolate in it, and you try to put the whole batter into one cupcake tin, and you're like, well, but I got all the rest left over. But you got to fill the whole thing. So even in the guidelines that I recommend that I told you about, they actually recommended 8 pills, but people just won't take 8 pills. So ours is 4 pills a day, but pretty big dose in all of those. So they're kind of big pills, but I don't know, like you got to try and find a way to get them to take it. So, you're like, do you make more pills or smaller pills or whatever? So
Yeah, people are not going to take 8 pills in a day. That's a lot. Four is even a lot, I would say, for most people.
it is. And you could do two well, I always tell people do two in the morning and two in the evening.
Yeah, or try to pair each of them with a meal somehow.
For sure, because it does have iron in it. We formulated a new kind of iron. Like the main reason people don't take prenatals is because they get nauseated or constipated, and that I don't. You need to eat in the first trimester, so that was a really important thing that we want to tackle. So we formulated a chelated iron, which is not nauseating and not constipating. You see, I like quality for my
Right.
people, my
Yeah.
ladies.
Especially when it comes to producing a child, you definitely want the highest of the quality ingredients for sure.
100%. Yeah.
So let's take it back before you're trying to get pregnant and you're actually preventing pregnancy. So what is your opinion on birth control?
So, I mean, it's a very personal choice. There's, a few different options, at least today. There might not be in a few months because of what's happening politically. But for now, you know, birth control pills, like for a younger person who is sexually active, it may make sense, even though, like, I don't like to suppress people's ovulation. But again, like, say you have an 18-year-old daughter who's sexually active, who's not that responsible. Obviously, you're like, well, if you're not responsible enough to take your birth control, you're not probably responsible enough to be having sex. But that doesn't matter because they don't care. They're going to be having sex anyway. So in that situation, if that was my daughter, I would probably have her take birth control pills. On the other hand, an IUD, a non hormonal IUD, is pretty benign. And some people have some problems with it, but most people tolerate it very well. It doesn't have hormones. It's more of a chemical barrier. Basically, the copper makes the uterine lining inhospitable. Um, and then, condoms are great. I think that part of it comes down to, how bad would it be if you actually if you had a mistake, if you had an unplanned pregnancy? So you're like an 18-year-old, you're getting ready to go to college. Unplanned pregnancy would be catastrophic, right? That's where I would probably lock it down with something more secure like oral contraceptives or an IUD, although most of the time they want you to have had at least one child before you've had an IUD. But if the person's super responsible, and it wouldn't be catastrophic, like Natural Cycles, there's an app you can use. They're FDA cleared to basically predict when your fertile window is. And they have similar success rate to like oral contraceptives, similar, not quite as good, but similar. But you have to do it, right? So on the days when it's not okay, if you have sex, you're not protected. You'll have to use a condom or something like that.
So what will taking birth control affect your fertility in the future?
Nope, there's no data to do that. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't use any of the implantable ones. They have some kinds of birth control that this like it's like they embed it in under your skin on your arm. And I've just seen a lot of people, many people in my clinical practice over 2 decades, that once they got it out, their periods didn't return. We were able to usually get them back, but it took months
Hmm.
to restore menstruation. So I think if I had to choose, I would choose oral contraceptive pills and know that there are a lot of different types of pills. So if you are taking oral contraceptive pills, you do want to just be careful because if not careful, but you just want to communicate with your doctor well. If you're having a lot of symptoms, they can switch to a different type and see and find one that you tolerate better.
Yeah, that's good that you can go back to normal. I just feel like doing that for so long, taking it for years, I feel like that would definitely have an impact on your fertility in the future. But I guess that's a good thing if it's not.
So there's no data that shows that it does. What it does do is because it's blocking ovulation.
Mhm.
So it looks like you have a period still, but you're not ovulating. That's how it keeps you from having a period. But that means that it's hiding all of those symptoms that I told you at the beginning that I get so excited about, like the length of the cycle, the ovulation, the cervical discharge, the types of PMS, what the blood looks like. That's all kind of artificial. It's basically drug induced. So if the person was having really heavy bleeding and a lot of pain and a lot of clotting, and she was like 20 years old, well, we would want to fix that now because that will affect her long-term fertility. And whatever she's doing that's contributing to that presentation, she doesn't know that she needs to stop because she doesn't even know that's going on. So what you sometimes see is people get off birth control and then their period's really bad. It's because slowly but surely over however many years, those little symptoms are getting worse and worse because the behaviors aren't changing or the habits aren't changing or the environment's not changing. It just gives us more work to do sometimes once they get off of it. But you kind of have to decide what's the best choice out of all of the choices given where I am right now. Again, it comes back to personalization, right? There isn't just an answer that's right for everybody. You have to weigh again, how much risk are you willing to tolerate? How much inconvenience? Like a diaphragm works great, right? You put a diaphragm in and you can leave it in, I think, for 8 hours. So you can have sex in the morning and sex later. And, it's extremely effective, but you do have to stop, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, put the spermicide in there and put it in. It's kind of a buzzkill. So that's why you just have to be careful.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is, but we're gonna leave it at that. So how does so where does the acupuncture come into play in the fertility? Like I don't know how I don't know how to correlate those two. What's happening there?
So acupuncture, remember, is just one tool that a doctor of Chinese medicine uses. So they also have Chinese herbal medicine. They have all kinds of diet, lifestyle, behavioral health interventions, and all of those are equally as important. That's what we proved, right? The app actually outperformed me doing acupuncture. So if you think about like a person comes and what we find is like they're really tired. They only have one. I just keep using the same examples. They only have one day of bleeding, and they have insomnia. And what we find from that is that the ability to make energy needs attention and the ability and resources to make blood. So you might use herbs to help enrich the blood a little bit, but you would use acupuncture for the energy piece. And so again, there's no points for fertility. The points
Mhm.
are the points that help the things that are not working that are hurting your fertility. So they would be points that we know that help to improve energy, like there's points on your legs and on your abdomen, on your hands, and things like that. And so that's how acupuncture works. People are like, well, any place you put a needle will improve blood circulation, and circulating blood to the ovaries is really helpful for fertility. So that often, when I was still in practice, most of my patients would have two needles popped in right on top of the ovaries because I want to, as we age, blood supply to the ovaries starts to decline. So we want to continually kind of trick the brain into thinking that there's more blood and more resources for the ovaries because it's basically like food for the ovaries and the developing follicles.
So when you perform the acupuncture, that's what you're trying to get more blood to that area. That's what you're doing.
In that particular state, or I might be trying to improve the efficacy of digestion, or I might, if they're constipated, I might want to be stimulating the intestines to move, or if they have headaches a lot, I might want to put a point. There's a point, this point that's in your hand that people talk about a lot, that it's a headache point. It's a headache point because its action is it causes blood vessels to dilate. So it's good for really any pain because when you dilate the blood vessels, you get more blood supply, and that's very effective for helping to reduce pain and improve headache.
Yeah, I've never done acupuncture, so I'm not familiar with what all it can do and what all it does. What are some other like use cases of using acupuncture?
It's best for anything that's chronic, reflux, any kind of pain. That's probably the gold standard. It's really better than anything for pain if the person has is skilled enough to do it. Because not everybody, in every profession, some are really skilled, medium skilled, low skilled. But typically, one acupuncture treatment should be like pretty unbelievable for pain. If you're super tired, if you're super stressed, if you have, it's actually really good for eye things. But that person, I would go to a Chinese person for that actually, because you have to do a lot of scalp acupuncture for that. And the people who are trained in China have more training in that than your average American. Even I don't have that training. It's really good for wrinkles. There's a whole subsegment of acupuncture called cosmetic acupuncture. And so when, I'm 57, so getting wrinkles and things like that, what happens is we age. First of all, like our neck and the muscles in our chest, if they're tight, they're basically pulling everything down. And this, like for here, this muscle, like all the muscles in your face with age start to atrophy. But what you can do is you can like pull up the skin and insert a needle into the insertion point of the muscle. It doesn't hurt. I mean, it's like nothing, and stimulate a little bit. And you actually cause a little tension to form in the muscle, and you'll cause that muscle to shorten. And it literally gives you a facelift if you do it regularly enough. And that would also, it would be, I would only go to somebody who says, all I do is cosmetic acupuncture, because they need a lot of special training for it. But yeah, that's would be the high level anxiety. It's very good for anxiety also.
So
Any
where
kind of
where
GIs.
where would you insert the needles for something like anxiety?
Again, you got to make a diagnosis. So what the acupuncturist has to do is interview the patient to figure out, well, why does this person have anxiety? So part of it is situational, right? They might say like, I'm getting divorced, or I'm worried I'm going to lose my job or whatever. That's the external part. But why is this person have anxiety while the next person who works at that same job who's worried about it isn't? They're depressed about it, right? They're having a different emotional reaction. And so, they're like, often anxiety and insomnia are associated with like lower blood volume in Chinese medicine. So if it's a woman, we can ask how many days of bleeding you have. Men, we have to look at the tongue. And so if the person had anxiety and it was because of blood deficiency, then there would be points like one in the stomach, one in the leg, one like, trying to find my camera, right here. So, just it would just depends on what the acupuncturist determines is the underlying physiological like predisposition to being an anxious person, because all of us can have different emotional reactions to stress and trauma. And why does one person get anxious versus another person get depressed versus another person gets withdrawn or whatever, or angry?
That's interesting. I didn't know acupuncture did all these different things.
Yeah,
I might have to look into it some more. I didn't realize it did all that extra stuff. That's pretty, that's interesting.
wonderful.
So, what are some like myths that are going on out there nowadays that you want to bust or you don't believe is true when it comes to fertility?
Oh, so many. The first one is Geritol is not a baby in a bottle. Geritol is a supplement, like a daily vitamin for old people, and it's like grocery store, like the cheapest grocery store stuff. And if anybody got pregnant using Geritol, it's just because it has a huge dose of iron in it. But that's quite dangerous, because if you're taking a prenatal, it already has iron. If you're taking my prenatal, it has a really high quality, very absorbable iron in it. And you can overdose on iron. So you don't want to be adding a bunch of iron. So skip the Geritol. Second one is a lot of people who are either trying to get pregnant or have this condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. They take this product called it's myo-inositol plus dechiro-inositol, and that's what a lot of influencers are talking about on TikTok. But the problem is by adding that little bit of dechiro-inositol, the job of that is to lower testosterone. So if you have high testosterone, that combination is really helpful, but only 2% of the population has that combination. So if you don't have that, if you have normal testosterone, you have low testosterone, but you have that little bit of dechiron in there, instead of helping you by lowering your testosterone to a normal level, it makes you have low testosterone. And then that makes you infertile, right? That loss of testosterone really has a negative impact on egg quality. The last one is that, well, there's many. I mean, I could do a whole show on this, but the last one is that I don't recommend people to use ovulation trackers, ovulation monitors, fertility trackers, or fertility monitors, except mine. That's not being cheeky. Every other tracker tracks information. They don't they might say like, oh, AI insights, but these are not real AI insights. Like they're not material, for as far as I can tell. But there's no data that shows that using a tracker changes your outcomes in any way. Any tracker, there's not a single study that shows that this actually improves the outcomes, and it certainly doesn't improve your likelihood of staying pregnant, which is really the only outcome that we should be looking at. We have these fertility monitors that are quite expensive, and you have to buy these expensive strips, and they're saying like, we'll help you find ovulation, because some people, especially with PCOS, they can have very irregular ovulation. But the problem is if you have irregular ovulation, you have a very high risk for miscarriage. And I think that those apps, to be in integrity, should say, we'll help you find ovulation on cycle day 40, but what we would prefer to do is help you. Let's get your cycle between 28 to 32 days so that we can make sure that you have the best chance of staying pregnant, not just catching it wherever it might be. They don't even tell the users that. And so then the users are having all these miscarriages and like, I don't know, I just can't stay pregnant. I'm like, yeah, because you ovulate on cycle day 40. Let me explain why that's important. So you have your egg, and the egg is maturing, getting ready to be fertilized by the sperm. And around cycle day 14, it's perfect. Cycle day 14, 15, 16, maybe even 17, it's still really good. But our bodies are designed that if we don't use that egg, we're going to reabsorb it. So it starts to break down. So the longer past cycle day 20 that you're ovulating, the more that the egg is starting to degrade and we have an egg quality issue. So what I would just recommend is if you have a 28 to 32 day cycle, you don't need a fertility monitor. All you have to do is have sex on cycle day 12, 14, 16, 18. The sperm can live for 4 days. That means you have spread sperm over 10 straight days and you can't miss the fertile window. And instead of trying to catch ovulation, I mean, like try to have sex right on the day of ovulation or right before it, the research suggests that it's more effective to have sex 3 days before ovulation and 1 day before ovulation, which is hard to do if you're using a monitor. This way, you just forget about ovulation and you're like, oh, it's cycle day 12. Honey, we're having sex tonight. And what's nice is say you have sex on cycle day 12 and either on cycle day 14, you or your partner are just, not there. You can just skip a day and go 3 days because we know that sperm can live for 4 days. It's better if you do it every single day, but you just can take it's a lot of pressure for both people to try to like get this timing of intercourse down. And it's just 100% unnecessary.
Yeah, it's almost like it puts a whole nother level of stress on it because you're trying to hit on the
Yes.
nail.
Yes. No pun intended, right?
So, so for people out there that have been trying for a while and they haven't had any success, what do you recommend for those women? At what point would you recommend some, like, I know they have IVF treatments. I don't know all the names for them,
Yeah.
but like fertility treatments you can take from a doctor.
Hmm.
What would you say to those women?
So, first, do your own work, right? Give yourself 4 or even 5 months. I know that seems like a long time, but just stay with me here. Your health at the time of conception is the strongest predictor of the health of your offspring. So it's in our best interest to take a few months to see, like, why am I not getting pregnant? What are the underlying issues? So what I would first do is I would download the app. You can use it for free for the first month. So you have it's free. Like just use it and use it like hardcore. Learn everything you can. Talk to her every day. Like really get acquainted and start and see what happens to your period in the first month. Take the supplements. And then over like 3 or 4 months, try to get your score above 60. If you're just using the app, it's going to just go up every single month. And then you want to try to get your score above 60. When your score is above 60, you are very, very likely to get and stay pregnant. If you don't get pregnant in 4 months or 5 months after that, that's where you go to the doctor and say, I want to do IUI or talk to them about using Clomid or IUI because now you're as optimized as you possibly can. You have the best chance of that working on the first try. The medications that they use with IUI can be really effective, but they don't help you to stay pregnant. And so I'll talk to people and I'm like, yeah, I had 16 IUIs, none of them worked. And I'm like, well, what's your energy like? It's like I'm so tired. It's like a 4 out of 10. Like, well, okay, what about your period blood? Oh, I only have 2 days of bleeding and it's really scanty. I'm like, no, 1,000 IUIs or even IVFs are not going to work. You're not ready to your body. It's not a criticism. Your body is going, I'm not quite ready. Can I just have a little bit more help? I need to make a human here, people. A human, not a sperm, a human. Think of the resources that you would need to do that, right? And so we need to be able to, we need our diet on track. We need to be able to digest. And really, you can do all of this in about 15 minutes a day. Like it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. If it's strategic enough, you're going to do a few very small things every single day.
Yeah, definitely. I think people underestimate the amount that they can do for themselves before having to go to the, I guess you call it IUI in the IVF.
Hmm.
You could do so much for yourself before having to get to that. But that's just a dude speaking. I don't know anything about all
No,
that.
no, you're good. You're good. I mean, well, I think that it's like, first of all, those treatments are, IUI is about 2,000 a time,
Hmm.
and IVF is 25,000. So if we're going to do it, let's be gosh dang sure that everything is working as
Hmm.
much as we can before we make that investment, right? You don't want to do multiple cycles of either one, not only because the money, but because it's a hard process, right? That people don't feel very good. It takes up a lot of time. It's emotionally trying. So some people are. I'm not saying like don't do IUI or IVF, but we want to make sure that you are like Rocky, right? You're like ready
Hmm.
to get in there and crush it.
Yeah, you're reducing your chances of getting pregnant without kind of setting yourself up for it. So you might as well, like, if you're gonna, like you said, it's $25,000. If you're gonna pay that money, you might as well get the best chances possible before you go and do that. So,
Yeah, just like, I mean, it's like around for fitness, like you wouldn't just go run a marathon tomorrow.
mm,
You would do everything. You would train for it. You would get ready for it. You would do the nutrition for it. You would do the mindset for it. You would do the physical training for it, blah, blah, blah. Having a baby, having like having a child, not the delivering, but like having a child in your life is like a marathon. It's so hard. You don't want, excuse me, you don't want to start it tired.
yeah, that's true. That's a good way to look at it, though. You're kind of like training for an event like a race. You got to
Mhm.
set yourself up for that. So
Yeah, for
that
being
correlates with me
successful.
because I do that. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, you just want to, you would prepare for it, and it's probably the most important preparation for both husband and wife, because the other
Hmm.
thing that's most important is the health of the husband, because the sperm, you guys are making sperm every 180 days, so you have a chance to really improve your sperm really quickly.
Do you, speaking of that, do you have any recommendations for men, just natural things?
Hmm. So I ask the same questions in many ways. Like, first question for guys is like, what's your energy like on a 1 to 10, no caffeine or exercise? The reason for that is because exhausted men make tired sperm. So we've seen just a tight correlation between when men have motility issues, that means how fast the sperm swim. When those are low, I ask the guy, how tired are you? And they're like, first they say, I'm not tired. I'm like, without caffeine. They're like, oh man, I'd be dead without caffeine. Okay, you don't have the resources to make energetic sperm. If you're tired, your sperm are going to be tired. If you're really exhausted, if you're really overwhelmed, if you're exposed to a lot of chemicals, we need to work on that, because that really affects the sperm. So making sure that you're not over exercising, making sure that you're eating plenty of real food. I mean, guys often, that at least the ones that I've worked with, are drinking a lot of smoothies and things like that. And I prefer to eat real food. Sometimes, of course, smoothie is like great, like once in a while, but not making that your primary sort of food source in the morning or whatever. Like, and making sure that you're getting enough sleep, because that's where restoration occurs. So depending on what job you have, what chemicals are you exposed to, BPAs and phthalates, these are the forever chemicals, are incredibly bad for sperm. So the testicle has a little wrapper around it that's sort of like the blood brain barrier that protects the sperm from almost everything. But unfortunately, BPAs and phthalates can cross that barrier, and it can enter the DNA of the sperm, and it can change the not only the DNA of, it can affect your DNA, but it can change the DNA of your offspring, and it especially has a negative effect of the future fertility of the sperm that produce males. So we really want to pay attention to that. So BPAs and phthalates, anything that's scented, anything that's plastic, so plastic water bottles, even your Brita, like your water filter, if your water's sitting in plastic, you're getting a big dose of forever chemicals from that. So, use like a stainless steel one, or, there's a bunch of ones that don't have plastic in them. My son had it, my son's 22, and we had a big argument because he's like, I need a water filter. And he's like, I'm going to get a Brita. I was like, no, don't get a Brita. I'll get you a better one. He's like, Mom, it just sits in there for like a few minutes. And I was like, no, it doesn't. You don't drink a whole gallon of water. I know you're going to put it in there, and then you're going to put it in the fridge, and then tomorrow you're going to drink it. Like, let me get, he's like, of course he thinks I'm crazy. Like, I was like, no, like you're 25, 22 years old. You're going to like be baby making age in the next few years.
Yeah, that's the plastics are such a thing that like we use them every day and you don't realize it that they're having an effect on your health or your offspring potentially.
Yeah. Well, even just like a cutting board, a plastic cutting board, every
Hmm.
time you cut on it, little pieces of plastic come off and go in your food, right? Even receipts from the grocery store or Costco or whatever, those that come out of the machine, never touch those. Those contain, I can't remember if it's BPAs or phthalates, 1,000, must be BPAs, 1,000 times more than a plastic water bottle.
Wow. Yeah,
And
I've been seeing the receipts come up lately. I've been seeing the new talk about that.
I always say, like, when I go to the grocery store, there's like a little grocery store by my house, and all these young women work there, and they're like, "Here, do you want your receipt?" And I was like, "Please, can I bring you gloves? Don't touch those receipts," like, because they're just touching them all day. I was like, "Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, this is so bad." I was like, "I will buy you guys a box of gloves if you'll wear them." Like, we won't wear them. I was like, "Okay, see you in a few years."
Yeah, I got so we had some plastic cutting boards and we had um the cook the skillets and pans and
Oh,
stuff with the nonstick, and I got on my health kick and I got rid of all that. I got rid of the pans, the cutting board. Um, so yeah, I've been trying to improve things like that, like you're talking about, trying to get better at it. because I watch a lot of fitness stuff online, health stuff. So
Hmm.
it's pretty things like that are starting to get more and more popular. People are starting to realize that little things like that that you don't really think are necessarily bad for you, or may have more an effect than you realize.
I think if you think about it, like it's they're just stacking the deck against your health.
Hmm.
Small, it's like, is using a plastic cutting board going to give you infertility? 100% no. But is plastic water bottle and plastic cutting board in your Brita or unfiltered water, and your Febreze that gets plugged in, and the perfume that you wear, and the nail polish and the hair dye, and all of those things, they start to really add up. Especially the things that we put on our skin. So be particularly careful about like skincare products, because they can have a lot of parabens, BPA's, phthalates, and it's just basically a transdermal treatment that we really want to try to avoid.
Well, awesome. I don't want to take too much of your time up. So, to end off the podcast, I want to let you tell everybody where they can find you at your app. If you have any socials or anything you'd like to share, please go ahead and let them know where they can find you at.
100%. So, if you just want to learn more, if you're just on a fertility journey, you're not willing to do anything, but you want to learn more, you can follow me on TikTok, Your Fertility Expert. And there's a bunch of fake ones. So you want to see like over 100,000. If it's anything less than that, then it's so many people are impersonating my thing. And then they'll try and sell you a psychic reading. So if anybody tries to sell you a psychic reading, that's not me. I wish I was a psychic. That'd be kind of cool. Second, you can visit our website, conceivable.com. You'll see that we're not talking about the app right now, but you can still get it at the App Store. Conceivable with Kai. Kai is me. Kirsten, AI, spells Kai. Um, and last, whatever, you can get my book on Amazon, Seeing Red by Kirsten Karchmer. There's another Seeing Red. And I think that's probably enough.
Awesome, thank you. I learned a lot. I enjoyed it. I'll definitely take some of these tips and use them whenever we do start trying to have some kids. So I learned a lot from you. And I'm glad that you joined the podcast, and I'm sure the listeners will have got something for it too. So thank you again for joining the podcast. I enjoyed it. So yeah, y'all be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.